Hello, so today we'll be talking about factors affecting growth and development. This is going to be the concluding portion for the unit on growth and development, where we have discussed different patterns of growth. Then we have talked about the differences between growth and development. Lot many things about growth and development have been discussed. Let us come to the point of discussing what are the factors affecting growth and development. So, to summarize factors, I have categorized into five main categories of the factors which can determine the or impact upon the suitable or optimal growth and development of a person across different ages, across genders, across their lifespan. So, coming on to the first factors. So, there are five factors: genetic factors, environmental factors, cultural and socioeconomic factors, biochemical factors, and nutritional factors. Firstly, discussing about the genetic factors, I think this need not need any introduction because whenever we have talked about any form of physiological trait, any phenotype, or any representation of gene, or any association with respect to say your growth or development indicators, we have known that there is an association of the genotype that is associated with a particular phenotype, right? uh, when we see the genetic factors, we can consider that since the formation of our fetus itself, of the genetic orientation of that fetus, our status of growth and development, they are to a very large extent determined by the genetic composition as well as the genetic expressions of those genes throughout the lifespan of that person, right? So what we see, the genetic factors or these genes basically are playing their role in a very coordinated sequence. Okay, because here across different characteristics trait which are visible during different stages of growth, during different stages of our lifespan, all these things are based on certain genetic expressions, right? So when we are talking about these coordinated sequences also, it becomes important that with growth and subsequent growth event to take place, certain genes or certain hormones needs to be activated at a specific time period. For example, when you're shifting from late childhood to adolescence age, there are shift in hormonal and your certain activation of your genetic composition, which leads to more advanced stage of adolescence that we have studied. So it generally happens in a more chain like fashion. Now, there are components of cells that are responsible for stimulating growth. For instance, when we see during the formation of embryo, the cells keep on dividing, they are multiplying, and ultimately they are leading to a form of gradual development of that embryo. Along with that, at the genetic level, there is a duplication of DNA constantly happening, and that is very essential for further progression of that developmental phase. Therefore, without these cells, it would that embryo would neither increase in size nor it would undergo any form of differentiation. So similarly, when we're talking about the role of DNA, this polymerase enzyme, it becomes very much important when we're talking about the process of DNA duplication, replication, transcription, translation, all those things. So that enzyme becomes very much important, right? Also, like, so these becomes some at some level we can call them as the inducers of growth, or inducers which are stimulating the growth, uh, such as the enzyme that I was mentioning. So these are considered as inducers of a particular growth related indicator at a particular stage of your life. Also, to some extent, when we have talked about modes of inheritance, patterns of inheritance, there are physiological characteristic traits which are also controlling your growth and development. For example, when you talk about the height of a person, you refer to what has been the height of parents or the grandparents. So that that hereditary component is also a part of genetic factors which you try to understand considering the phenotype of a person. Then also with respect to the twin studies, or say the gender of the child, then the skeletal maturity, the stature, all those things are basically what we try to understand through a mode of inheritance or a pattern of inheritance. So that thing also becomes a part of your genetic representation. Coming on to the second method, which is environmental factors. We are all aware of the nature versus nurture debate. So along with the genetic factors, these environmental factors do play a very significant role in controlling growth and development. For instance, this example of migration, which is indicative of the shifts in environmental conditions that a person is exposed to, it can bring out adaptive modifications within a body, and therefore affects how growth or development of that person is being affected, right? So for instance, you can cite a very good example from refugees. Constantly their environmental conditions is in, now here environment refers to both the physical and the social environment. So a constant shift in their environmental conditions, very migratory populations, they really have an impact on their developmental trait as well as the growth related traits. Here multiple factors could be attributed. For instance, the availability of proper housing condition, proper resources, food or other important essential commodities. Then you can say about the enrollment of a child into schooling, a good schooling, quality education, which ultimately affects their cognitive, intellectual development. In fact, their social relationships or their formation of peers during adolescence. So all these factors are constantly helping them in adaptive modifications, and that could affect the growth and development aspects also. Similarly, there are climatic conditions which constantly change, or extreme climatic conditions also. If a population is exposed, then they have a different form of growth and development aspects. So as you have also discussed in the coursework on human ecology, climatic conditions affects the rate of growth, like we have seen in Eskimos or Inuits, where the rate of growth is lesser as compared to the counterparts in Africa. So because of different climatic conditions in both the settings, the effect on rate of growth or effect on the parameters of growth and development are very much different. Sorry. The third important thing here is also with respect to your social environment. Now, social environment, we have discussed very extensively how it is important across all stages, starting from your postnatal, from your neonatal stage till your in fact, in your early years, we have essentially talked how that role of stimulation, or proper caregiving is very much important for a very holistic development of a child, right? So here, therefore, in absence or in presence of a good stimuli or any activity, play related activity for that matter, it affects the growth and development of a child, because their involvement in those activities, or say their control over emotions, or not having good friends in their circle, or these things are also affecting different aspects of development. Especially you talk about their emotional development, intellectual development, then their socio-emotional and behavioral development overall. And when a person is not involved into play related things, activities, many different, even the physical growth of that person is affected, right? So as we have seen most of the places, that how within gender we can see exposed to similar different stimulations of the same age, identical twins, they also vary because their stimulations in both the cases have been different. So therefore these things are very much affecting the pattern of growth and development. Coming on to the third factor, which is culture and socio-economic. Now, see, to a very lot extent, when we are saying the genetics do play, their role. Similar, on the same hand, we can say that uh, the social, cultural, economic parameters are also playing a very significant role in controlling development and growth. For example, the book we are referring to, Harrison and Tanner, they have observed that there is a high difference among the children of unskilled laborers and the managerial classes. So that difference, why could that difference probably be? Because of their economic status. Because one being having sufficient power to expend, second not having that sufficient uh, expenses to even suffice their living with proper meal or proper clothing for that matter. So therefore that differences within height is observed with respect to their working as in their employment status, one being unskilled labor, one being into managerial classes, into manager and more a formal uh, industry. So this difference is quite a typical example of how we can relate to the socio-economic conditions with the height or any growth related parameter. Now there's also a difference when we talk about these two these two conditions, these two cases of unskilled laborers and the managerial classes. Apart from height, there is also a difference in the age of attaining a particular level of maturity, right? So all those things are very, it serves a good example of how you can relate to the cultural and socioeconomic factors determining the growth and development aspects. Now what could be the major causes of how they hypothesized what could be the major causes of these two deviations of growth within a same living condition, as in the same geographical area. Then what could be the major reasons out of these two different working conditions? What could be the concluding hypothesis, right? So first thing they mentioned was with respect to the nutritional deficiency. They said that nutritional deficiency among the weaker sections, it may start from the prenatal phases itself. A poor state of economy of the weaker sections deprives a child of a balanced diet. Moreover, that illiteracy of parents may also lead to this problem of, it could also consequently lead to the nutritional deficiencies because of not being aware of all these things. So this is one hypothesis that they have given. Second was with respect to their home environment, living environment. The home conditions are causative factors for their growth retardation according to Tanner. They reflect intelligence and personality of parents, which provide emotional needs for the normal growth and development of a child, right? So starting from their neonatal stage itself, if the home environment, I have given you examples of in war-like situations versus in a more setup like we are sitting at home and having this online session. So in both the conditions, you will see the differences comes in terms of how the parents are dealing with their child, or what kind of relation they have within the family, or how the home environment is being more stimulative for a child to involve, engage, or even play, right? For the simplest of all things. So these things are affecting how a child is intellectually developing, how a child is able to express his emotions or engage in activities and develop a form of skill, even the motor skills, basic motor skills. So these home environment, they therefore play a major important role in the growth and development aspects. Then coming to the third hypothesis they provided was with respect to poor family expenditure. Now a low economic condition has made them suffer from all the deprivations. Therefore this family budgeting never reflects that it is child centric, or it is keeping child at the center and then determining the budget. No, because that economic condition does not helps them to think that child is the center. In fact, they have to manage each and everybody's needs accordingly with respect to that budget. So that planning therefore is again determined by what is the economic status of that family, right? Fourth hypothesis was with respect to the minor illnesses. Now, due to malnutrition, the children are more prone to illnesses like we have seen cold or measles, all these things. So that has a very long term impact on the normal development of that child throughout their lifespan. So therefore their immunity is at risk. They are, in fact, if they get the disease in the early phases, it could deteriorate their physical growth, their conditions, their catch-up growth is being affected. So if these are all associated with their dietary pattern also. Essentially, if a child is being malnourished in the early years, that has a risk associated with it, and therefore we see most of the childhood mortality associated with malnutrition because of these risks of infections and further major and minor illnesses. Right. The fifth hypothesis and the last hypothesis he gave was with respect to smoking pattern. This habit, both in any of the parent, has an impact on the growing fetus. Now, if they are born stunted or if they are having any deformity or any defect, then that prevails throughout their life, and that has a direct association with the lifestyle activity of that parent. So that is one thing. However, due to developments which are happening in the field of society and economy, there is a secular trend which is now obvious in the growth patterns. There is an improved nutrition, there is an improved and a clear environment, and practices like exogamy have helped develop this new secular trend. But still there needs to be a lot of research evidences needs to provide from all these domains. Then coming to the fourth factor is the biochemical factors. Now, largely human growth and development is an interplay of these genetic components as well as the hormones which are secreted by the endocrine glands, which is very much important for your physical growth as well as your cognitive and neurological growth also, neurological development. Example, across different phases of life, prenatally, postnatally, we see different growth hormones. We see thyroxine being released. During adolescence, we see LH and FSH, etc. So coming on to thyroxine, one good example, this hormone is active throughout the stages of growth because it is essentially responsible for your permeability of cell membrane, then protein synthesis and things like that. One being thyroxine, second being growth hormones, which is responsible for the formation of joints of your bones in the early phases itself, then for cell division, for building of your muscles, again protein synthesis, fat synthesis and things like that. Cannot forget LH and FSH because these hormones are responsible for the secretion of testosterone, estrogen and progesterone, which are also responsible for formation of sexual characteristics, secondary sexual characteristics and things like that. So therefore biochemical factors have very clear-cut evidences of at what stages they are playing their role, and across lifespan they are constantly playing their role in promoting physical growth, cognitive growth, intellectual growth, neurological development and things like that. Right. Now coming on to the last consideration is the nutritional factor. So nutrition is the most important factor affecting our growth. When we talk of appropriate growth and development, we refer to an optimal diet being provided to that person. But that requirement, again, optimal diet, there is a standard kilocalories of energy being required for a person in a day. But that requirement also varies from person to person, also across different ages. across gender. So there could not be a single dietary protocol that we can recommend. Also, when we're talking in reference to Indian population, we cannot refer to the energy requirements of, say, a European population or a US population. So therefore, that requirements of population across geography, across ages, across gender is different. So that is very much important to be considered when we are talking about the nutritional factors. Also, for instance, when we are talking with respect to an infant, their caloric requirements is per day is totally different from that of a child, and that of a child is completely different from the adult. Now, also, when we're talking about caloric requirement, we must refer to what are the sources of that caloric requirement, of that calories that they're taking up. So that sources have to be carefully monitored. For example, a child is consuming a lot of snacks or, say, junk food. He or she can expect calories out of it, but is it nutritional? Is it having nutritional value attached to it? So that becomes the ultimate question. And therefore we see a lot of conditions associated with malnutrition or nutritional deficiencies, then protein deficiencies. All these things are having a prolonged association with the long-term illnesses during childhood and during early years, because that is the phase when we are more prone to having infections. Our immunity is constantly at risk, and if we do not get a proper diet, also if we talk in terms of children with disabilities, then their exposure, if they do not get an optimal diet, because any form of neurological disability do require a suitable and optimal diet which is full of having nutritional values. So again, the parents have to be informed. If they're not aware, then that child with disability is at risk because they are not getting the sufficient amount of optimal required calories, required nutritious food. So again, they are more prone to infections. Their immunity is constantly having a threat for infections. Also, with respect to malnutrition, as you were mentioning, long-term illnesses throughout their childhood, and then they do not attain a genetic potential of their physical growth. So that is not attained. Therefore, the final stature is also generally considered is lesser than their achievable growth. So it's called stunted, and it's not up to the level of what they could have achieved. So as I was referring, there is a lack of catch up even if you do not have a nutritious diet. So therefore, all these factors play a very crucial role in determining the physical growth and development of the person. And that is it. If you have any questions, write down in the comments. If you want to give any suggestion, that is also very much welcome. Okay, thank you.